I'm going to teach you how to plan a 5K. I'm going to do so using two new frameworks you might not have seen before. Number one is what I call the event builder framework, and number two is something called the 5 Ps of event planning. The event builder framework is a 6-step process that takes you from ideation to execution to where you're even after the event and you're reflecting upon it. Imagine you're standing in front of a very still pond, and right in front of you is a big rock. What do you want to do? You want to throw that rock in the middle of the pond so that it splashes. Well, that splash is a lot like your event, and the still pond is a lot like the people's lives who are going to be at your 5K. And so here's the thing that I know about you is if you're planning a 5K, you want it to make a splash. You want it to make an impact, and that's what your event should do. And not only that, it should change the lives of your team, of your guests who are your attendees, the people running in your 5K. And if you're raising money for a nonprofit, it should make a difference in the nonprofit itself. So in order to get there where we have a rock making an impact, where we have an event making an impact in people's lives, we have to do a couple of things. The first thing we need to do for our event is we need to determine the why, which also correlates to the first P in the 5 Ps of event planning, which is the purpose. So when we're determining the why, we are deciding what is the purpose of our event. Is it to fundraise? Is it to simply have a good time? Is it to build community? What are the reasons why we are hosting the 5K? And then step number 2 in the event builder framework is to create the outline. And that correlates with the second P in the 5 Ps of event planning, which is the plan. So when we're creating the outline, we're creating the general plan. We're imagining this dotted line where we're saying, hey, this is where we think it's going to go and where we think it's going to end up. And this is how big of a splash we think it's going to make. And so we're creating the idea in our heads and we're writing down the outline on paper. Step number 3 in the event builder framework is to refine the plan. Refining the plan correlates with the final 3 Ps in the 5 Ps of event planning. So the final 3 Ps are people, our place, and our provisions, or the actual like items and the equipment that you need. And I promise it's going to make more sense here in a second. So the 4th step of the event builder framework is as your rock is starting to head towards the actual pond itself, as your event is drawing closer and closer, you need to prepare for success. So you need to make any final preparations, you need to meet your deadlines, your team needs to be on point, you need to have the vendors lined up. And then finally, when the rock is actually making impact, when it is event day, you need to be producing with excellence. And then once your event is over, once the rock has made its splash, once your event has made a splash, and the ripple effects can be seen from your event, then you need to be reflecting upon it and reviewing what went well and what didn't. And so now let's go ahead and put this into practice and see what this looks like within the event builder framework and within these 5 Ps of event planning. So with step number 1 of the event builder framework, we are determining the why. Why will our audience be there? Why are we hosting this event? We need to answer these questions. Why are you hosting the event? Why will someone come to the 5K? Why will they run in it? And then if you are fundraising for a 5K, if that's the main goal, then you need to answer these very clear questions. What are you raising money for? So in other words, what will the money that is raised be spent on? And how are you raising money? So now that we have determined why we are hosting the 5K, we've answered the questions like, why will people run? Why am I putting this on? How am I going to raise money? What am I going to raise money for? Those are what we are picturing. That's when we are imagining that in that first step of the event builder framework, determine the why, we are picturing the splash happening. It hasn't happened yet, but we're picturing all of these things coming to fruition. And that is our end goal. That is what we are trying to accomplish. And so now that brings us to the second step of the event builder framework, which is creating the outline. And that is going to be the plan from our 5 Ps of event planning. So the outline version of the plan is not super detailed. It is pretty detailed, but it is not down to the minute and the second. It does not have every single person's name. The outline version of our plan is simply putting to paper what we think should happen when and where. And when you start to work on your plan, you need to divide it into 3 phases. Phase number 1 is going to be pre-event. That is setting up for your event. So it's actually event day and people are arriving. And then the second phase of your plan, the second phase of your outline needs to be the event itself. So once things have started, what is happening, where is it happening, who's going to be there, and all of those details. And then the final and third phase of your event is going to be the post-event. Don't forget about this part. You need to have a detailed plan for who is picking up what, who is cleaning up what time are people leaving, how are they leaving, where are they going, and all kinds of things like that. If you're new to this YouTube channel and I've never met you before, hi, I'm Sean. I'm the founder of Event Builder, and I have spent 5.5 years of my professional career working for a company putting on hundreds of events for elementary, middle, and high schools. And then after that, I moved on to 6.5 years working at an event planning, production, and consulting agency, working with companies like Chick-fil-A, the Home Depot, Atlanta Falcons, and I put in more hours, thousands upon thousands of hours spent helping companies and nonprofits plan events, and I have been a part of dozens of 5Ks myself. So if I were starting from scratch, planning a 5K, here's what I would do. As you can see, I've already got a ton of notes written down, and in the pre-event phase, I would think first about the setup. Now, what I would do in the setup is I would write down who do I have that's going to be there, or at least who do I think that I need to have, because I haven't gotten quite that far yet. And so I'm going to need my staff and my volunteers to be setting up. I need my vendors to be setting up. That's people like the DJ MC or your sponsors or anybody that's selling food at your 5K, things like that. Who are the race timers? These are the people that are gonna be at the start-finish line, tracking when they start and when they finish. And then I need to have my race route set up. That's thinking about do I need to have the city involved? Do I need to have the police involved? Going back, vendors can also be simple things like porta potties. Don't forget about restrooms at your event, right? And then during the pre-event phase, I also need to think about registration. Where are they going to check in, sign in? Maybe they've already bought their race bib or their entry online, or maybe they have not. So I need to have a table, a tent, and I need to have a system where I am collecting new registrations as well as checking people in who have pre-registered. And then pre-event, after we pretty much get set up and we've got those taken care of, I need to think about the pre-event experience, which are things like announcements. In the announcements, I need to make sure to say thank you to my sponsors. I need to announce where my registration table is. I need to announce where is food and water and things like that. I need to announce where the vendor village is, what's going on there, who's involved. One time I was working with the American Heart Association, and they had local news stations that had come in with like these off-road vehicle type things. They had cameras mounted on the back, and they drove them around the vendor village, and they would stop and interview people, and they would interview both people that were participating in the walk, but also the vendors that were there. And then we were broadcasting it on top of these like 50-foot LED walls with audio so that everyone could hear it. So making announcements and drawing attention to the vendor village is going to make next year even easier for you to sell these, because people are going to say, hey, you really put me in the spotlight and you made me look good and I got to talk to all of these people, which is the reason why your vendors are there. And then also in the pre-event phase, after you move on from those basic announcements, then you need to think about a welcome and a warm-up. Now, one might be able to argue that this would fall under the actual event start and end time, but for a 5K, I'm kind of classifying this a little bit different, saying that the start of the 5K is actually the start of the event. So pre-event, you need to do a welcome and a warm-up. So you could have a welcome and a warm-up from the mayor of the city, from the head of the nonprofit, or whatever organization is putting on the actual event. And then you can do a warm-up. A lot of times at a local 5K, I have been a part of introducing a local fitness person. Maybe it's a Zumba instructor or a CrossFit trainer. At one 5K that I've been a part of a number of times with a nonprofit called the Atlanta Mission, we would do a lot of warm up through dancing, where we would play songs like the Cupid Shuffle. And then what we would do is we would look around at who's really getting into it. And when I was the DJ MC on stage, we would pull these people up on stage, have them dance, have the crowd follow them, and it was a whole fun experience, really making the audience the stars of the show. And then the final thing that you need to do during this welcome and warm-up stage is then you need to send people from your stage area, from your vendor village, from your welcome registration. You need to send them to your start and finish line. Now, I recommend sending them in waves. Here's what I mean by that, is you can classify people, and you don't have to necessarily do this upon registration, but you can simply make the announcement and say, hey, if you are a serious runner, and I'm talking about like you are a cross-country runner, you're really in shape, then I need the fast runners to go first. Or if you want to, you can divide people into phases where you can have on their race bib a certain color or a certain group number. And you can say group 1 to the start finish line, group 2 to the start finish line, group 3 to start finish line. So you can divide people up that way, or you can have them divide themselves up by saying, hey, we're going to send you out first. Everyone stick around here, but first I need the serious runners who are going to be running as fast as they can to try to have the best time possible to the front of the start finish line. So ready, set, go, you guys go. Now, if you're gonna be walking in the party crowd, then I need you to stick around with me. And then if you are going to be simply walking, strolling, then I want you to stay back and you're gonna be in the final wave of our runners for our 5K. And now that we've moved people to the start finish line, we have moved on to the event phase of our outline. So the event phase, we are going to think about things like the start finish line. What does it look like? Who needs to be there? Do we have a sound system with music playing? I highly recommend it. In West Palm Beach, one of the things that we did at a 5K where I was the MC there is a couple years in a row, they've had someone sing live a cappella the national anthem. So they would bring in someone, maybe it's someone from the nonprofit, someone who benefits from the nonprofit, and they were singing the national anthem before we started the actual race. Then you need to think about, how do you actually start the race? The way to do it is to build up energy and to make it fun and make it exciting. A wrong way to do it is just to say like ready, set, go, which has its place, but just don't make it awkward and don't make it weird. Make sure to have fun music playing. And then after the start of the race, you need to think about your volunteers, your staff, and anybody that's there to cheer on someone who's in the race. What are they doing? What do they see? What are they hearing? So you can still keep on that fun music. And you're gonna play it for a couple of minutes, because with a 5K, it's gonna be 12 to 15 minutes before you have the runners start coming back. But when they do come back, that's when you can be coordinating with the timing company, with the MC DJ again, to be making announcements as they're coming across. Maybe they're reading the iPad. I've done this before where you read the iPad, so they're approaching. The timing company is scanning. They're scanning a device that is logged into their race bib. And then I was holding an iPad, and on that iPad, their name would pop up, and I got to announce their names as they ran across the finish line. It was pretty funny, because as they were coming across, they were like, how does this dude know my name? All I'm wearing is a number. It was pretty fun. And then after the 5K, after the last racers come across the start finish line, or at least most of them have, you might have a few stragglers, then you need to be thinking about the post-event celebrations. So while the timer is calculating who won the race, and they're dividing them up into different age groups so that you can give those awards away, then you can make announcements again for people to visit the vendor village. You can have more dancing, more music playing. You can have more announcements of, hey, make sure to check out this booth where you can make a donation to our nonprofit. That's why we're here today. You can announce how much money was raised. You can give thank yous to certain sponsors, to certain people, to certain vendors. And then finally, you should have an awards moment at the end of your 5K where you are giving out awards. So gold, silver, and bronze, maybe medals with your logo and the 5K race name. And you're giving those away for different men and women, boys and girls who cross the start finish line the fastest in their age group. So you can divide them up into ages 0 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, on and on and on. And then finally, to close out the post-event phase, you need to say thank you. And then you need to switch into it's time to pack up mode, where everyone is loading up, vendor village is shutting down, your vendors get to pack up and go home, and you get to celebrate the end of a successful event. Make sure to include that in your plan. So now we have covered the purpose, we've covered the plan, we have created the outline, and we are moving on to the next steps in our event builder framework, where we are preparing for success, where we're refining the plan, we're getting ready for the event, and we're doing so using the final 3 Ps of the 5 Ps of event planning. So we need to think about what people need to be involved in our event. Now that we've got the outline, who needs to be involved? So you can divide this up into staff. That's anyone that's on your team. It's you, maybe fellow coworkers or employees that report to you. Maybe it's a marketing manager, someone who's stepping in that does a lot of other types of events and can help you with this one. Then you need to think about your volunteers. Are those your family, your friends, your coworkers, or do you have a volunteer base that you can rely upon? You need to think about what vendors need to be involved. Audio and visual, so that's the lighting, the microphone, the sound, the stage. The city might need to be involved in that one because they need power there, or maybe you're renting generators. Who's doing that? And then you need to think about your race timers. Is that a company? Is that someone that you know? You need to think about an MC DJ who's going to make announcements, play the music, give sponsor shout outs, be that hype person, be the entertainment. And they need to be so good that they need to be your event insurance. And here's what I mean by this. I was the MC DJ of a 5K. And when I sent everybody, they got on the comm, they said, hey, Sean, go ahead and send everybody to the start finish line. So I start making the announcement. I start to say, hey, serious runners, if you're super fast, you're gonna be in my first wave of runners, the first group of people I send. And then in the back is gonna be my party people that are chilling. So I send everybody to the start finish line. Well, then they get on the comm and they go, oh no, we made a mistake. We weren't supposed to send them right now, even though it was on the agenda, it was on the plan. The 5K route was not set up by the city. And so I had to entertain them as the DJ MC for an hour at the start finish line. So we were delayed by 1 hour. People hung out for 1 hour and I had to MC and DJ a dance party, social media. We did some giveaways. We did some things with mascot. I mean, I was coming up with stuff on the fly as well as things from my back pocket. And at the end of it, you cannot believe how many people complimented me. They were frustrated 100%. They did not want to be delayed an hour, but they still were thankful that I was there to help them stay entertained for that hour while they were waiting for the 5K to actually start. And then other vendors that you need to think about is, are you bringing in food trucks or some other person that's selling food, giving away bottles of water, things like that. The city should probably be involved if you're running a route throughout the city. And then you should have some kind of security force, whether that's the police or otherwise. And then the other people that's going to be involved in your event are your sponsors. So are you going after really big name companies or do you already have some in mind? You can think local. And then you can also think about who are your attendees? Who are the people that are going to be coming up? Why are they attending your event? And who are they? The fourth thing that you need to be thinking about, the fourth P in event planning, is the place. So for a 5K, I recommend either going to a public park, going to a field, or going to a parking lot. I've done this on the top deck of a parking garage before, where this is where Vendor Village was, and this is where the start finish line was. Put them fairly close together so it's not a long commute, so that people at start finish line can hear you in Vendor Village, so that people in Vendor Village can hear you at the start finish line. I recommend that as well. And so when you are thinking through this, this is what you need to have there. You need to have some kind of stage or stage area. Maybe it's not a physical stage, but at least it's a stage area, an open spot of grass or an open spot in the parking lot where whoever's making announcements or whoever's talking and addressing the crowd can stand and can be seen and can be heard. And then the other part of the place that's a little bit tricky for the 5K is the actual route itself. So you need to map out where are people running to and where are people then running back to. So most 5Ks, they like to have the start and finish line in the same location. So they either run in one side and then in from the other side, or they run down and they run back. That's completely up to you and where you are hosting your 5K. The fifth and final P in the 5 Ps of event planning that we need to be thinking about through the phases of the event builder framework as we are approaching the event date is the provisions. Now that is the items and things that you need to have on hand for your actual 5K. Here's a list that I created thinking through this video for you so that you don't have to come up with this on your own. You can take mine and then you can start to build it out for your own. You don't have to do this from scratch. So you need to have AV equipment. You have an AV vendor, that's someone who's involved, but you need to have what equipment? How many speakers do you need? How many systems do you need? How many microphones do you need? What types of microphones do you need? Then there's bottles of water and snacks. What do you need from there? Do you need to go buy it yourself or is someone bringing that? tables, tents, and chairs, the start-finish line, t-shirts. Now, the start-finish line, let me back up here. What I mean by this under the provisions section is not where it's going to be, but what is going to be at the start-finish line. Are you going to have this huge arch? Or are you going to have just a banner overhead? Are you going to have something for them to run over? What is going to be at the start-finish line? Are you going to be selling t-shirts or giving them away? What are the registration packets that you need to have there? Do you need to have pens on hand or iPads for registration? The race bibs, you need to have those pre-printed for people. You need to have cones, flags, etc. for marking the route, marking off vendor village, things like that. So other items I'm sure will come to you as you are planning and preparing for your 5K. Now, what I've done here is I have given you a pretty great place to start from. And then now what you need to do through this, now that we have a general outline, I've basically created it for you, going back to the top and looking at our event builder framework, I've basically created an outline for your own 5K. I'm gonna take these notes. You can find this agenda template and I will give it to you as a gift. It's in a link in the description below. And you can take this outline and then you need to follow the event builder framework where now you have an outline using the 5 Ps, you are going to refine your plan. Here's what I mean by that is you need to make it more detailed, make it more thoughtful. So if you're thinking about the people, let's scroll down there. If you're thinking about the people involved, you need to write down people's names, what are their roles and what are their responsibilities. And then you need to prepare for success. That's the stage where you are gathering things together. You're getting closer and closer and closer to your event date, and you are making final preparations. And then you need to follow your plan that you have refined, follow your outline that you have made more detailed, and produce with excellence. And then finally, the last thing you need to do after your 5K is you need to reflect and review. Reflect and review where you are thinking with your team, thinking about the event holistically. How did it go? What could be done better next year? And things like that. Now, if you want to take this outline that I have given you and move incredibly fast at things like writing scripts for your MC and other things like that, then be sure to check out this video where I teach you how to use artificial intelligence to help your event planning process go even faster so you can be more productive.